So today it is my great pleasure to introduce Dan Mori. Dan is from Employment Solutions New York, and I was chatting with him just a few weeks ago, and he was talking to me about a program he has for sales mastery. And as soon as he showed it to me, I'm like, would you please present this during one of our Lunch with Haley webinars? And thank you, Dan. Really appreciate that you were willing to come and do this for everybody. So we're going to see today an overview of a great system for managing staffing sales. Dan said he's got a lot of content, so he said, please use the question box to enter your questions. We'll get to them at the end. And if we run out of time at the end, we will follow up afterwards. I'll also be monitoring along in real time, and if there's things that I can answer just by typing a response, I will. So Dan, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to you. Take it away.
Awesome, David. I really am grateful for that amazing introduction. Obviously, we've been colleagues and friends for a long time, and you've been a part of our journey. And I'm grateful to be able to share some of that journey and that success that we've had along the way, especially through difficult times with your audience today. So appreciate you having me on. And I do want to kick this webinar off. As David mentioned, my name is Dan Mori. And really my goal here today is to teach you how you can actually grow your staffing agency during an economic downturn without being or hiring a superstar salesperson, okay? Before I jump into it, I do want to give a shout out to the proud partners that are kind of helping us get this message out there. The National Independent Staffing Association, they obviously work closely with Haley as well. It's a great group of people, great community of owners. Staff Up app is a mobile application for the staffing industry. So if you don't have one of those and you'd like to actually have a mobile application that plugs into your ATS, it's a great product. And obviously Haley Marketing, there's no better marketing partner for staffing than Haley. David had a very successful staffing agency prior to Haley. He grew up in the industry, he knows it. That's why they're so successful helping staffing agencies get their marketing in order and build great websites. So I'm super excited to be here with that. What I'd like to do is actually get into telling you a little bit about me and my background before we go too much further, so you can understand kind of where I come from and get a feel for why I'm sharing this today. And I think it's important to know that I don't really come from an affluent background. I don't really have any special skills or talents. I was came from a working class family, divorced parents, was a pretty average student. I joined the Army Reserves to fund college, and I actually ended up dropping out of college because I wasn't a huge fan of learning and that kind of stuff. So I really haven't done anything of any significance in the early part of my life. And where that led me was into retail sales. And I really was sort of liking it because you can make some decent money, but I hated the industry. Like, retail is just a grind. You never feel appreciated, and it was just kind of awful. And it really I bounced from one dead-end job to another dead-end job to another dead-end job, and while I had a little bit of success, I just hated it, and I want you to know that that's a little bit, kind of about my background getting into this. But what we're here for today is really two types of agencies, okay? The system that I've built is it's going to work for two types of companies that are listening today. So one, if you're an agency and you don't have a dedicated salesperson, and you are maybe just that salesperson, or your recruiters share sales duties, or you don't really have a sales focus right now, what you're going to get out of today is actually a dynamic system that you can use, you can teach to your recruiters. It's super simple, and they can actually put it into their daily routine without disruption. And a lot of the techniques that they use in recruiting actually apply to my sales system, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. The other type of agency that this is for is an agency that might actually have a dedicated salesperson or a sales force, maybe even a sales manager with salespeople. And what you're going to get out of this is still that same dynamic system that's going to give your salespeople hyper-focused and direction on what they're supposed to be focusing on to increase sales. But it's also going to give a sales manager the easiest, most simple sales management and accountability tool that you've ever seen. So that's really what, who we're talking to today. And my goal from this web class is to teach you that the only way that you can actually grow your company is through an effective sales system, okay? Having that effective sales system is the only way that you're actually gonna really be able to grow your agency and get the results that you want to. And the other thing I wanna share is that the most effective sales system is really the one that I've built in the staffing industry and actually still use today. So when I say that it was built in the staffing industry, this isn't something that came off the shelf. This was actually built out of necessity, because when we started our company, like, we needed something. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But this is what was tried and true and actually helped us grow through the Great Recession. When we were coming into the Great Recession at the end of '08, we were doing just around 2 million in annual revenue, but coming out of the Great Recession in 13, we were approaching 20 million in revenue. And this system that I'm going to share with you today is a big part of that. And I've actually been refining it ever since over the last 7 years, and I'm grateful for that, because taking this system into the current, pandemic that's going on and the economic downturn that's sure to follow is giving our company a lot of confidence to be able to attack this, find the opportunities, and grow out of it. But while the financial results that we got were great back in the Great Recession, I actually want to tell you that some of the most fulfilling results of this for me personally was the growth that I experienced through the process of actually becoming a staffing professional. And that's something that I can't really put a value on, but it's kind of amazing as you grow through something and grow through success who you become. And I think that's pretty special. I do want to share with you that the fact that this is a system, I want to encourage you to stay to the end. I know I'm going to share a lot of content, but like every system, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So I want you to stick to the end, hear everything we're going to share. And for those that stick with us, I actually have a pretty special offer I want to share. And Haley's got some offers that we're going to put together today too for you. So back to the background. Obviously, I told you there wasn't really anything special about me. I didn't come from an affluent background. I don't have a college degree. I had a little bit of retail sales experience. So I was at a point in 2006 where I was just fed up. I had a traditional job that was awful. I was working really long hours. I hated my boss, and I felt like I kept getting passed over promotions. And I was so frustrated. I just couldn't stand it. And I wanted something different. I wanted a better life. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to take charge of that. And I knew that as I was getting a little bit older, I'm going to want to settle down and raise a family. And I just couldn't do that working retail sales hours, like nights, weekends, holidays. Like, it was just miserable, and I absolutely hated it. And there was actually one day that I just got fed up and I quit my job. I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm drawing my line in the sand, and I'm never going to work for anybody else ever again. Like, I just declared it and said, nope, I'm not looking back. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna figure out how to succeed. And I actually partnered with a couple buddies of mine, and we started Employment Solutions in New York, a little town called Elmira, not far from where David is in Buffalo. And I didn't have any experience in staffing. I didn't even know anything about the industry. I didn't have experience selling a service. I didn't have, experience selling to businesses. All I had was retail experience, and it wasn't really the same. However, in 2007, the economy was great, and despite not having any experience, I kind of stumbled into some success. And our first year, we actually did $1.5 million in sales. And I was incredibly excited. I was super proud, and I was like, yeah, we're doing this. This is super easy. And it was amazing. And I was so excited to see the company growing so quickly. And I really thought that we were off and running and kind of our futures were made. However, for all of you that are actually around in this time, that by the end of 2008, those good feelings were gone. Like, they were just, it was awful. Like, the markets were crashing, and, the economy was just grinding to a halt, and like everything was just falling off a cliff. And honestly, business was drying up. I was terrified. Like, there we were, this small little company. We hadn't really been in business that long. And, I was like, what are we going to do? Like, internally, I'm like, we're going to fail. Like, we're going to go out of business. Like, we can't sustain this. Like, we're losing clients, or, it was awful. It was terrifying. And honestly, I was super stressed out. All of 2009 was just a blur. And I truly thought that I was going to have to go back to a job that I hated, working a dead-end job, and I was going to be seen as a failure in this business. And I was super embarrassed by that. Like, I didn't know how to face my friends and family, and I wasn't sure. And I really, honestly, looking back on it now, 2009 was the absolute worst year of my entire life personally. Like, it was just dark days. And, that held true until I met this guy named Tony Van Dinther. Now, Tony actually sent me an email, and probably a lot of other people an email, but it was a marketing email. And it came to me, and it really described the situation that I was in, this dire economic situation, and I was terrified. But he offered this promise of hope. He was like, if you come to this, this workshop in just 2 short hours, and $49, I can solve all your problems. And I was like, what? This is amazing. Like, how could this guy that I've never even heard of before solve my problems? Like, I was so excited that I signed up for the course. And this is actually kind of embarrassing but funny, but I actually tried negotiating with Tony over the $49. I was like, hey, times are tough. Can I just come for free? And he was like, no, you can't. He's like, I literally made this course as cheap as I can possibly make it for you to still be vested. Because if this is going to work for you, you have to pay attention. And those that pay attention. And I was like, okay. I was desperate. I needed to learn this stuff. So I paid it and I sat through the 2-hour session. I actually stayed after to talk to Tony, and I told him, I was like, Tony, I want to let you know, man, like nothing's working for me. Like this, like the system you just talked about, all this stuff was really cool, but it's not going to work for me. And let me tell you why. And I proceeded to tell him all the reasons why his stuff wasn't going to work for me. And he sat there and listened to it. And when I was done talking, he looked at me and he gave me the biggest gut check moment I've ever had in my entire life. And he looked at me and he said, Dan, the reason that nothing's working for you and the reason that you believe that what I just shared with you won't work for you either is you. He's like, you simply do not believe that you can learn anything else. He goes, he's like, you just don't want to admit that you've got more to learn. You don't want to look like you're not in control, or you don't want to look like you don't have all the answers and you're not all put together. And you're honestly either too proud or too embarrassed to ask for help or find people that can actually help you out. And until you get past those things, you're never going to achieve the success that you want in life. And I was just like, whoa. I was angry, honestly. And deep down, I knew he was right, you know, and I looked at it and I knew that I needed someone to help me get there where I was. Like, I liked the idea of being successful. I liked the idea of putting on that front and looking like I had it all figured out and looking, you know, like I was self-made. But in reality, like I wasn't, and I knew that. And in that moment, I sat there and said, you know what, Tony, you're right. I hired him as a coach and a mentor. He wasn't cheap, but I hired him and we got to work. And, you know, I want to let you know that before this, like I didn't have any structure. Like I didn't understand business to business. I didn't understand things like that. I literally was just kind of going around just like finding people that would listen to me and tell them about employment solutions and how great we were. But I didn't have any system, you know, and I might like call someone one day and email another day. And if I didn't hear from any, I would just move on. I would just kind of flow through. And I didn't really understand the importance of systems until Tony taught that to me. He showed me the reasons that systems work, and he showed me how to build a system that would work for us, you know, and he taught me the importance of a sales structure. You know, he taught me the importance of a buying process and that there's actually a buyer's process, just like there's a selling process. And he showed me how those things mirror up. And it was amazing to me. And I started to realize, wow, this is pretty incredible. And later I actually came to learn that from Carl Bryan, that this buying process is called the buyer's journey. And, you know, for those of you that are not aware of this, this is pretty important stuff. But every buyer goes through this situation where they might identify themselves as having a problem and saying, hey, I've got this challenge, I've got this issue, this problem or whatever. And they start becoming aware of it, right? And then they admit that they've got this problem. They start, you know, researching ideas or ways that they can actually solve this problem, right? And they start looking at possible solutions. They start evaluating them and justifying these solutions. And then they move in the decision stage where they're actually going to make a buying decision and solve their problem, right? The problem for us is that only 3% of the market at any given time is actually in the decision stage. So only 3% of the market is actually buying at any given moment. So, you know, we've obviously told like how important is the timing of sales, right? So that it's so important that you're actually with your customer or with your prospect when they're in that buying stage, that or they can't buy from you. Like it's plain and simple. Like if you're not there when they're there, they can't buy from you. You know, and I started to recognize that. I'm like, oh, like this makes a ton of sense. You know, and I want to take a minute to point out like the importance of marketing and sales and how they work together in this phase. You know, when it comes to the awareness stage, like they're not really taking prospecting calls. They're going to say, hey, they're fine, because no one wants to admit they have a problem before they've really labeled it and figured out some solutions, right? Like that's just human nature, you know? And the consideration stage, like that's all marketing. Like this is when they're doing their research online, they're looking for stuff. So you want them to be able to find you, right? Like if they don't find you and they don't know you exist, right? They don't know that you have a solution. They can't consider your offer, your solution as a solution to their problem, right? So this is where, you know, and Haley actually has a really special offer that can help you own the internet and kind of, you know, improve SEO and Google. I actually just checked out the offers and they're pretty amazing. They're really, I think they're doing the industry a favor right now. But David will send you the information on that. But that's the part that you would actually use to dominate the awareness stage and the consideration stage. And then you mirror that up with the 30-day plan I'm about to share with you. That's will help you own the decision stage and help make sure that your prospects know exactly who you are, exactly what you offer, why it's the right fit for their problem. So when you prospect them during the decision stage, you're going to meet them when they're ready to buy. And that's how you start to convert more sales meetings and how you start to get more customers, right? Understanding when to be here in this time, right? So that's the importance of systems. And when I saw this, I recognized I need to create a system. So I did. My system, I'll truthfully, it didn't look this pretty way back in the day. It's evolved quite a bit since then. But my system that I created looks something like this. Now, before I talk to you about why this system works, I want to share with you the old way that I used to do things, right? Remember I told you before I knew this, I literally didn't have a system. I was no structure. I was like Dan, the random act of sales guy, right? That's all I did was these random acts of sales. I would literally run around and I would tell anyone that would listen about employment solutions about how great we were and about how we had the best recruiters and we're independent and we weren't like the big companies, we were dynamic, all these things, right? And I'd go to the networking events and all that stuff, and it was really just kind of a smorgasbord of sales activities. It was completely random. And the trouble with that, or the hard part about that, is there's no control over the outcomes, right? Like you can't force a customer to do business with you. You just can't, right? So literally what I was doing was like a Hail Mary. It was like kind of a pitch and pray. And it just wasn't, it doesn't work. And for those that aren't sports fans or familiar, a Hail Mary is the least efficient, least effective play in football that's saved only for the basically bleakest moments of desperation, right? And it's when you're doing random acts of sales, it's no different. That is the least effective, least efficient way of growing your agency. So once I connected the two, I realized that I needed this system that was going to allow me or force me in a way to actually be in touch more than that 1 or 2 times that I used to do, where if I didn't contact anybody, I'd just move on, right? So I created this 30-day system where I would actually put together like call days and email days and walk-in days, and back before the days of social distancing, right? And networking and referrals and things like that. And I started to work the system, and I started to hang out longer than those 1 or 2 touches I used to do, and I started to see results. And the most shocking thing that came out of this is in the early days, I realized that the sales meetings most often came between 13 and 17 touches. 13 and 17 touches, calls, emails, networking, referrals, like all these different things, letters, all these things I would have to do. And I was coming nowhere near that before, right? So in my old way of doing things randomly, like I would never get into that 13 to 17 sweet spot for me. And it's different for everybody, but that's what I needed to do to get a sales meeting. So once I started doing that and getting these meetings, that's kind of what helped us grow. It was a big part of helping us grow from that 2 million in 28 to approaching 20 million in 2013. So it was really, really just life-changing for us, but it's not just me, right? Like I've actually shared this concept, informally with some of my friends in the staffing industry, and the ones that have actually adopted it and implemented it, they've seen similar results, so it's just a simple system. And that's the part that I want to share, is that most of what we hear about today online about marketing and sales, it's way too complicated. It's just way too complicated. Like it's just confusing, and like they say, hey, you need this fancy, expensive software, or you need this thing to do way more tracking and accountability, and it requires data entry, and it's like, it's just too much. And I honestly believe that we just need to get back to the basics and focus on the very simple things of prospecting and selling, and do the things that actually drive results. So what I want to share with you today is really just the fundamentals of prospecting and selling, the super simple, super easy way to actually grow your agency. And it starts with these 3 strategies, and before I jump into them, I know that, about 20 minutes into a presentation, you're thinking, okay, this is great for Dan, and this might have worked for you, but it's not going to work for me, right? Like I get that. Like you might think that like I was a good salesperson or whatnot. Trust me, I wasn't. Like I literally was not prepared to do staffing sales. Like it took me a lot of time and money to learn how to do it the right way, or you might be thinking that, maybe I got lucky. I don't believe that. I believe we make our own luck through the work we do, or, maybe you're thinking that, I had a better system or better leads, and that part is actually true. And that's what I want to share with you today, is how do you build a better system and find better prospects, right? So the first thing is really talking about targeted prospecting, right? And I'll tell you, when I learned this system, I was super reluctant. Like I thought, this sounds good for other companies, this sounds good for the big agencies, but I didn't really know how this was going to work for me and my little independent staffing agency. So I was super skeptical. In fact, I remember one day sitting down and saying, okay, today's the day I'm going to start this thing, and I'm going to do some research, and I'm going to do all this stuff. And I'm like, what? I don't want to waste an entire day, because I could be missing a good sales day. So I'm only going to do 20. I'm going to put together 20 on my prospecting plan. So I sat down and I did the research. I found 20 companies in my area online. I looked at their information, got their address, their phone number, their email addresses. I found out who the HR decision makers were. I even tried to research how I was connected to those people, you know, and I put this plan together. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start off with cold calls. It's only 20 of them. And I'll admit, like, I've done cold calls in the past, but that afternoon, I swear to you, that phone weighed 800 pounds. It was awful. It was nerve wracking. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I was actually almost excited to get a gatekeeper or a voicemail, right? And I don't know if I was afraid of success or I just was in disbelief that a simple system could work. And I'd love to tell you that, like, I made a lot of success on day one, but I didn't. And not a single call got through to anybody, right? And honestly, day two was my email day. I sent all my follow-up emails and nothing. I had crickets, literally no response whatsoever. Now, mind you, my old system, I would have given up. A phone call unanswered and an email unanswered, I'm done with you. Like, I'm going to move on and find someone that's willing to talk to me. But I didn't give up. And I'm glad I didn't, because literally on day three, something magical happened. Technically, it was day 5, but the thing happened on day 3. So day 3 was my mail day. I actually wrote out personal handwritten cards. It was only 20 of them. And one of the people on my list was this guy named John. And John had just bought a manufacturing company in my area. And I thought that was cool. So I wrote him a handwritten note. And I'm like, hey, John, think it's really cool that you bought a company in this area. Would love to meet you someday, right? Send it off in the mail. Day 5, and I've never seen the mail work this fast ever in my life, but day 5, his administrator calls me and says, hey, John got your note, thought it was cool, would love to meet with you. Can you come in tomorrow? And I was like, what? Seriously, what? And she's like, yeah, John thought it was really nice touch and he'd like to meet with you. So I'm like, so I was super nervous because, again, I'm like new to business and like this guy's bought companies and that's amazing. And I couldn't even imagine buying a company at this point. You know, so I went in and met with him and I was super nervous and probably had the worst sales meeting that I've ever had in my entire life. But I actually came away with a client and an order. I was like, holy crap, that worked. I was like, how did this, what? And it was amazing to me. And again, I would have given up before 3 attempts. I would have never sent that letter in the past, right? So it was like, that was big time for me. So I started to realize, hey, there's something to the system of doing this. So I started to get belief, you know, that this thing could work. And really, as the confidence started to grow, you know, I actually realized I wasn't very good at these prospecting behaviors, you know, and I realized that my experience in selling was not a match for this industry. So if you remember, like, I sold in retail physical products to people that came to me looking for them, right? Like, that's the type of sales experience that I had. Now in staffing, I was actually required to sell a service to a business that I had to go out and find. Completely opposite. It was literally like being right-handed your entire life and then all of a sudden having to write with your left hand. Like, it was that confusing to me. I'm like, I realized that I don't know how to do this. So I actually worked with Tony. I enrolled in his sales class, his sales coaching class, you know, and I worked with him to get better at making cold calls and to get better at, you know, writing emails and to get better at networking, make networking actually work, and, you know, get better at building a referral network that actually created referrals. You know, I worked on these things and I put in the time to learn how to do these things, and it started improving my results. Like, I started getting more sales meetings and getting them a little bit sooner in the cycle, you know. But what was happening is I realized that once I got these sales meetings, I actually had to sell, right? Like, I actually had to do some selling, you know. And, you know, when you have to do effective selling, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And my old way of doing things, I literally would show up to a sales meeting and the customer would invite me in and they say, okay, kid, you know, tell me about your company. And I'd be like, this is great. Employment Solutions is the greatest thing in the world. We're the best agency ever. We're locally operated. We're owned, you know, close. You can talk to the owners. Like, we've got the best recruiters and we've got, you know, the best software and we've got like the job seekers. Like, we can do everything. We can fill temp. We can fill perm. We can do it all. Right? Like, that's kind of how I sold. I had all my tchotchke, my pens, the whole nine. And that was my pitch. Like, and if you're on this call, like, thinking, that guy's not very good, I mean, you're right. And if you're thinking that I was good, then we need to talk after the session here. But anyway, you would pitch like that, and I would typically get like 1 of 3 responses, you know, and it would sound something like this. Okay, kid, sounds good. You know, if you leave your information, I'll call you when there's a need, right? And when I was naive way back in the day, like, I was super excited. I'd be like, yeah, I got one. Like, they're gonna, like, when there's a need, like, if they would have bought from me today if they needed someone, right? Like, that's what I told myself. Like, but when there's a need, like, they're gonna call me first. Like, this is amazing. I go back and I tell my recruiters, I'm like, yeah, we got one. Like, we got this order. It's coming. It's coming. You know, and they would kind of pick on me, and they're like, a week later, be like, hey, how's that order coming along? I'm like, it's like, well, you know, he must be super busy. Like, he must be out selling because he's not taking my calls anymore. But like, that's kind of how it would be. And I didn't realize that, like, what buyers do is the easiest way to get rid of a salesperson is just to kind of say maybe really nice, right? So that's kind of how they get rid of salespeople. And I didn't know how to combat that or make that not happen until I learned some ways to do it, some more effective selling techniques, right? The second thing that prospects might say when you're in a sales meeting is, okay, this sounds good. Can you find me this? Right? And they proceed to finish that sentence with that, like that unicorn or needle in a haystack. And for me at the time, it was like, can you find me a CNC machinist for like $13 an hour? And I'd be like, yeah, I just got done telling you I can do it. So of course, why couldn't I do that? Of course I can. Yeah, I can do this. Let's sign a contract. I'll take the order back to my recruiters. They're the best. They can find it for you, right? So I do that, get the contract signed. I'd write out my order form, and I'd drive back to my office, and I walk in and I talk to my recruiters. I was a little sheepish because like I knew what was up, but I slid it across their desk. I'm like, hey, I got you an order, right? And they'd be like, this isn't an order. I'm like, what do you mean? It's an order. They needed a CNC machinist. And they're like, yeah, for $13 an hour, those don't exist. Like, this isn't an order. This is this thing that like, if you can possibly find this, like they'll take it from you because it doesn't exist, right? And the reality is if you actually found this person that's willing to do this job for $13 an hour, they're not very good, right? And that's the worst kind of candidate to send. So no, this is not an order. I'm like, oh, I didn't know any better, right? But it's the third response. It's the third response that is the biggest trap of all. And this is the one I want to focus a little bit of time on today is the, okay, how are you better than your competitor? Because we hear this all the time, right? And way back in the day, those days, I honestly thought when they asked me this question, I thought they were like, oh, this is awesome. They want me to pitch my presentation again, right? So I'd be like, okay, let me tell you how I'm better than my competitor. You know, I'm Employment Solutions, and we're locally owned and operated, and the owners are accessible. We're not like the big companies. And I would literally just regurgitate the exact same sales pitch that I just told them. What I didn't realize is the reason they were asking me, how are you better than your competitor, was because they couldn't tell. From everything that I just shared with them, and everything I said, and everything I said we could do, we didn't sound or look or seem any different than any other agency in the area. And if you're doing that, if you sound and look just like every other competitor out there, and you leave your customer asking you, okay, how are you better than your competitor? It basically, you're doing a disservice to your customer. If they leave confused, not knowing how you're better, what's going to happen is you're creating this apples to apples comparison, right? And we always say, hey, we want to do an apples to apples comparison to keep it fair, right? Not when you're competing against your competition, not when you're competing against other agencies. You do not want it to be apples to apples, because when it's apples to apples, when all other things are equal, you end up competing on price. When all things are equal, you compete on price. That's the apples to apples comparison. So here is the pro tip of what you want to do. You want to create the apples to oranges comparison, okay? Don't fall for the trap. Now, here's the deal. I can't tell you what your answer is because it's different for every company, right? Like why you're different than your competitors is like your own special sauce, okay? What I can tell you is how I answer this question every single time, and I'm going to tell you how to, finish it and figure out how to finish it for you, okay? Because if you find yourself competing on price today, it's just because you haven't figured out how to differentiate yourself properly. If you figure out how to differentiate yourself properly, using the right marketing and the right verbiage and the right delivery, you can actually get better markups than your competition because you're getting more value, right? So this is my standard response. Anytime any client, any prospect, anybody says, how are you different than your competitor? Actually, you know what? Let me just tell you a quick story. I was actually in a sales meeting a couple weeks ago. A client, and this is actually no joke, this client was on my original top 20, and they've been ducking me for like 12 years, right? I finally got a meeting with the owner of the company, finally, after 12 years. Like, I don't ever give up. I'm persistent, if nothing else. And this guy asked me this question. He's like, okay, everything, sounds good, but like, tell me why you're different than your comp. What can you do that's different for me than my current provider? How are you different? And I said, honestly, I don't know. I don't know how I'm different. I don't know enough about what they're doing for you to tell if I'm different at all. In fact, I don't pay attention to my competition to decide what I should or shouldn't do in this industry. I focus on serving my clients' needs. Is there anything that they're doing for you that you don't like or you would like to see improved, that you would like me to be different in that way? You see what I did there? So I'm humble, I have humility, and I admit the truth. I don't know how I'm better than my competition, because that's true. I don't really know, because better is subjective. And then I basically break it down and say, I don't look at my competition to determine what we should or shouldn't be to our customers. And that's also true for us. We don't baseline ourselves off our competition. We just don't. Like, we believe we're the best. We provide the best service. That's true. But we provide the service that our customers need us to. So I let them know that, like, we don't look at our competition to determine who we should be. We focus on being who we need to be for our customers. Is there something that your current provider is not doing well enough, or you would like to see improved, that you would like me to be better at? And what I'm hoping for, and what typically happens, is they say, well, yeah, how do you deal with sending, just warm bodies? I'm like, okay, I don't do that. How do you deal with this situation, right? So that's how I handle that situation. And if you ever get asked, how are you different? How are you different than a competitor, or how are you different than my current supplier? Use that statement, use it, and it will work wonders for you, right? So that right there is one of the best tips I have about effective selling and creating that apples to oranges differentiation that can actually help you look different, so your customer doesn't have to ask you why you're different. They'll be like, wow, this agency's different. And once they think that you're different, they're going to think that you're the one that provides the value, that you're not a commodity, which means they'll pay your prices, right? So, but this system that I'm sharing with you doesn't just give your salesperson, or you, if you are the salesperson, a more effective system. Like, this is super simple, and it's going to give your salespeople a super simple system to follow and give them direction and guidance and know exactly what they should be doing and what they should be focused on. But it's actually going to make your sales manager's life a lot easier too. And if you have the unfortunate job of actually managing salespeople, it's like herding cats, right? It's going to make your job super easy. And the reason why is because it builds simple accountability into it. It's really, really hard to hold a salesperson accountable for not hitting a financial goal or not acquiring a client, because those are out of their control. Like, we can't force companies to do business with us. And we can't force them to spend whatever GM target or sales target that we have. Like, we just can't force that. What we can do, and what's 100% within a salesperson's control, is the number of calls they have to make, the number of emails they have to make, the number of walk-ins, not during social distancing, the number of, networking things they need to do, the number of referrals they need to get. All those things are 100% within the control of the salesperson. So as a sales manager, now you have something that can have your salesperson focusing on the right stuff, and you can hold them accountable to actually doing the work that's going to lead to the sales meeting. Does that make sense? So it's going to make your life super, super easy. But again, we can talk more about that, but I want to talk about something that's hitting people today, right? The biggest excuse that I was telling myself back in the Great Recession, and that a lot of salespeople fall back on these days when their results start to slip, is nobody's buying. Sorry, boss, nobody's buying, right? Hey, I can't hit my goal this month because nobody's buying. I used to tell myself that too. And you know what? I was dead wrong. And salespeople that are saying it today, they're dead wrong too. People are buying. And this is something that I learned about business a long time ago, thankfully, is that in every crisis, in every economic downturn, there's two sides. There's two sides. There's the haves and the have-nots, if you will. There's the people that are going to get crushed by what's going on, and there's the people that are going to thrive because of what's going on. In today's economy, the hotels, the restaurants, the casinos, anything hospitality, sporting events, they're getting crushed right now. Airlines, they're getting crushed right now, right? Like, they're just falling on the wrong side of this economy, this downturn. However, companies that make paper products, Procter & Gamble, they're crushing it. 3M makes the masks, they're crushing it. Zoom, GoToWebinar, the platform we're on right now listening to this, like, their sales are so high right now because this is the new normal, right? So like, there's companies that are ending up basically, they're buying more and they're hiring more because of what's going on. And the same is true of staffing. This happened in the Great Recession, and sadly it's going to happen now. There's going to be independent staffing agencies that don't survive. There's going to be the ones that sit back and do nothing, and if you do nothing, nothing happens. And that does not work, So the companies, then there's going to be the staffing agencies that do something, they take action, they take advantage, and they seek out the opportunities of the prospects that are actually buying and could use our service. And those staffing agencies are going to thrive. Now, it's not always easy to know that, so you have to figure it out. There's a couple things that you can do to figure this out. I've done this. I'm going to talk you through this. Really quick, funny story. Way back then, I was complaining that no one was buying too. And my recruiter, she said to me, she goes, well, why don't you just call our competitors clients? She said it like it was the most nonchalant thing in the world. Like there was just some yellow book out there that just said, here's this company's clients, right? I was like, yeah, and how would I do that? And she's like, I know who our competitors' clients are. And I was like, what? It's like, why have you never told me this? And she was just like, well, you never asked. I was like, I'm thinking, how would I know to ask that question, right? And obviously, we were friends, and it was kind of a little bit playful. But after a while, I was like, well, hold on, wait, can you just tell me, like, how do you know this? the technique she told me is a recruiter technique. It's not even a sales technique. So if you're in recruiting, like again, you're prepared for this. And if you know what this technique is I'm about to share, like you were light years ahead of where I was at back then. And if you don't know what it is, I hope it's as life-changing for you as it has been for me and my company. But this is what she said. They tell me. I was like, what? She's like, they just tell me. And she's like, a lot of times they just put it on their resume. And I was like, what? And I had this aha moment, like literally you could see the light bulb over my head. And I was like, you're telling me that I could literally just go on and do a resume search for my competitors' names and there's a high likelihood that I'm going to see who their clients are? And she's like, yeah. I was like, what? This is amazing to me. And I was like, this is so great. Like this is amazing. And that's what I did. I basically pulled up our job board resume search, databases and started looking for resumes that had our competition's name on them. And lo and behold, that's true. That's what I would find. And I was like, this is amazing. Now I know companies that are actually using staffing. So now if you know this about sales, there's two things you have to sell. The reason why to use staffing and the reason why to use you, right? Well, if they're already using staffing, like that's one sale that I don't have to make. Now I just have to show them why they need to use us, right? Through differentiation. And that part was a little bit easier than convincing someone why they need to do something that they're differently doing, right? So this was super amazing. And it's like, wow, that's incredible. And it's like, there's still tools and resources out there that most people aren't even aware of that can help you find a better prospecting list. Like here's something that we're using today, and we're putting together our sales campaign for the COVID-19 campaign. As a database, this is literally a database of over 6,000 companies that will tell you the name of the company and what their current hiring status is. And it will tell you some of them actually list out what the positions they're hiring for and like where to apply. And it's like, if you see this, yeah, not all of them might use staffing, but if you cross-check this against your region and against your competitors list that you know who their clients are, like you can find a super targeted list of companies that might be in need of your services right now. And when you make that call, it's increasing your chances of getting through to someone that actually needs it, that is aware they have a problem and is going to be open to listening to a solution. So that's the kind of power of having a sales management system that's focused on a super simple system like this here. So the question that I really have, I know I just threw a lot at you, but like at this point, like, do you think something like this would work for you? I know people are like, whoa, like, yeah, half of you are like, I'm super excited, like this sounds great. And the other half are like, that's just way too much information. Like, it's just too much. But I want you just to sit and pause for a second and think, hey, if I was to follow Dan's simple 30-day prospecting plan and just do the things that he did, during the Great Recession, he's continued to do since, could you be successful? So as we're nearing the end of the presentation time that David's been so gracious to give me today, I guess what I'll do before I go to the last slide is, David, do you want to, I see some questions over here, small chat. Do you want to open up and maybe take a few questions? I think we got just a few minutes.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Dan. Got a couple of content-related questions, and we'll go through them in order. So in the section where you talked about the buyer's journey,
yeah,
how do you get around the challenge of not being on the approved vendors list? They may want to use you, but you're not approved. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So how I personally handle it, there's two ways I've typically done this in the past. One is I actually go through an approved vendor, and it sounds really weird to do it that way in subcontract, but sometimes that's my last resort. I'm going to tell you my last resort kind of first here, because I've done that where I've reached out to them and said, hey, can I subcontract through you? And I start to build relationship, and I've actually used that to show that our company is very good at what we do to actually get onto the approved vendor list, to become an approved vendor. So I've done it that way. That's one strategy. The other thing that I do is I literally will coach the person up. If a company says, hey, we really want to use you, I'm going to say, okay, who is it that you need to convince to allow us on there? And what are the roadblocks, right? I kind of prep them to get that information. It's usually something along the lines of, we only work with nationals, or we have to work with people that have, a certain SMB designation or something like that, right? So sometimes you run into those situations, but I kind of teach them how to lobby for me, but I'm teaching them like, hey, I want you to share this in this way, and then get me a meeting. And I literally just I almost like deputize them as a salesperson, and I'm teaching them what to say about us that differentiates us, that can actually make the person that's bringing what my offer is to the solution look like the hero, right? And I kind of teach that person how to be an ambassador for me. Like I said, I deputize them as a salesperson, if you will, and teach them how to look like they're presenting something that's of great value. The other side of it too, and this is something very unique, and I'll say this quickly, and if there's other questions, maybe I can go in later detail, at a different time, but there's other things you can do to your offer that can actually make you look different. So instead of just saying we provide staffing services, maybe you do things like, like for us, we have compliance services. We have, GMP standardized orientations. We have, ISO 9001 compliant SOPs. We've got these things that build a really strong case as to why we should be a, approved vendor. We've also got some unique things that we can actually include with our staffing services that are fairly low cost to us, but are high value to the client. So we start packaging all these things together to look like we're actually providing more of a service than what they're currently doing. So those are a couple of the ideas. Hopefully that was useful. I know that that's more an advanced technique. But yeah, those are a couple of the ideas that I've used successfully in the past.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. All right, the next question was, when you talked about having multiple touches and taking, I think you said 15 to 17 touches to get somebody's attention, get an appointment, how long do you go in between those touches?
Yeah, so this is actually a great question. So in the 30-day plan, I literally have a touch every single day. So this is going to sound really, really crazy, and it seems like I'm like, annoying and I really bother people. But if you space your touches out just right, it's not going to seem like the same kind. And David, I know that you know this because you've built like multi-channel, dynamic campaigns. So literally, like I might do a call on day one and an email, and yeah, that's a back-to-back touch, but it's a different medium, so it doesn't seem the same, right? And then on day three, sometimes I might do a walk-in, other days, if I'm depending how I feel about the campaign, I might just schedule what do you call like a mailer, like a letter, a handwritten letter, right? And if you mail that out on day three, it might take a couple days for them to get that. So it might seem like a day is in between there. And then like I might schedule, a networking day. And this is going to sound weird because you're like, well, how can I possibly schedule around like a networking event? If there's a good networking event that falls on a networking day, I'll go to it. But there's other techniques that I have for networking that will help me get towards that prospect where I might not actually touch the prospect that day, but I move closer to the prospect using a networking technique that I have. One of my days might be a referral day, and I've got a very specific system that I teach about referral networks that, where I'm not actually touching the client that day, but I'm actually talking to one of my referral partners, and I'm helping get in the door there. So it's really like I have something going on every single day, and it works out to be, I think, like 23 or 24 touches overall throughout a 30-day plan, because I don't work on weekends, right? Hopefully you don't either. But that's how it's worked. So there's an activity every single day. And it's designed that obviously you're going to move people in and out of the prospecting into your sales cycle or just kind of into the no category or not now category. So it gets a little bit lighter near the end, but there's something going on every single day. But I space out the types of touches to make it seem like I'm not calling and being annoying every day. And I also don't leave voicemails every single time. So if you get the voicemail and you don't leave a message, it also seems like there's a little bit of distance between. So that's how I do it. It's a variety of different touches just to cover all my bases for the ways that people want to be communicated with.
Excellent. The next question. So, Dan, let's say you have a salesperson who's doing all the right things. They're following an 8 to 10 step system. They're strategically going after customers. They're using the phone, text, handwritten cards, LinkedIn, but they're still not getting yes right now. What do you have them do?
I love this. I love that question so much because I used to struggle with that. And here's the beauty of this system. Once you start to see that they're doing all of the right things, you can actually start to see the things that actually work and the things that don't and what they need to be improved upon, right? So if you start saying like, hey, if they're literally doing everything, if they're doing all the calls and all of the networking and they're doing all like the right prospecting techniques the right way, they should get a meeting. I mean, that is, I don't care who you are, you can be the worst prospecting person in the world. Like if you're doing all of it, like you should get a meeting. But so what I'm saying about doing it the right way, you as a manager can look at that and say, hey, you know what, maybe it's the way that you're saying this. Let's just test this, right? Let's just test this. Like I want you to send, let's say you got a list of 50 people that were prospecting. I want you to send this text message to 25 of them and this message to 25, right? Always be testing things because when it comes down to sales, if you're prospecting and you don't get a result, like that's not a fail. Like it's not about good, bad, failure, success. It's just is or isn't, right? So what I do is I'll just test different things and I'll start to look at the way that they're saying things. Words really do matter, and it's not what you say, it's how you say it sometimes. So I will literally get down and craft, like, are they giving enough of a hook to get a response? Are they saying something that will actually get them to, say, yeah, I need this service, right? And little things like this. So here's an example, because I want to actually tell like real stories and real examples here. So a lot of times people will give a message and say, hey, this is who we are. We can help people out in these times, and we can help people find temporary positions or hard to fill accounting positions. And you talk about what you can do, but what you need to realize is our clients don't buy our service. They buy what our service does for them, right? They buy the productivity of the person that they need you to find for them, right? So a lot of times it's your messaging that needs to be improved upon. I've seen this firsthand. I've done these A/B tests and I've seen it where you might say something like, hey, have you been struggling to find good people when the unemployment is low? And right now, are you struggling to find really good people that are actually willing to come out of their houses and go to work for your essential business? You got to find that pain point. You got to say it in a way that's going to elicit a response. So for me, if I saw that they were doing all the work and they're putting in the work, I know I got someone that's willing to do the work. I'm absolutely going to work with them. I'm going to look at everything they're saying and every single touch point. What is their verbiage they're using on a cold call? Are they using the right pain prompters? They got the right 30-second commercial going on. What's their email? Like, is it really designed in a way to get a response? I'm going to be looking at that and coach them on it. These are all things I'm going to actually teach during my course. But if it's a LinkedIn messaging, I'm going to show, like, I can tell you, I've got data that shows you the messages that get the best connection rates on LinkedIn versus what doesn't work, right? So like, I'm going to look at all those things and just test out different variants until I can coach my salesperson. But so that's the reason I love that question, is because this actually gives you a baseline to show where does your salesperson need to be improved and how can you help grow them as a sales manager, right? Otherwise, you're just going to basically be shooting, blind darts, right? So that's some of how I would handle that situation in a super fast overview. So
Fantastic, thanks. We're right at 3 o'clock, so there are a few other questions. Dan, you said you'll get back to people via
I will.
email. So if I didn't get to them, I apologize. We ran out of time. There were a couple of questions, real quick ones, that I would like to bring up. We had a couple people ask, hey, Dan, does this work in healthcare staffing and does it work in IT staffing?
Yes.
There,
Yes.
simple answer. And I'm assuming you can, if people have specific questions about the nuances of selling in those two environments, they can reach out to you and talk about that.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely. And it's weird. I did not actually have a slide that had my contact information on there. So, so what we'll do is, David, when you give me those questions, I'll put together an answer and then you can send out my information with the answers and stuff. And anyone that wants to go take a deep dive journey with me over 13 weeks, go sign up, be part of the course. Don't let, $247 be the reason that you don't take this next journey with me. And also, I got to let you know, you guys all know Haley really well, but I want to give the shout out. They're way more than a marketing company. I always kind of, peg them as a marketing company because that's what I've known them to be amazing at. They're a technology company. They have some really, really cool things. I'd be remiss if I didn't share it with you to go to this webinar and actually see what they're doing next Tuesday on how they're actually helping staffing companies leverage technology to be better, to really dominate that buyer's journey, right? And that's really why David and I were a good combination today, because what they're doing can help you really dominate the first part, the early part of the journey, and what I'm going to teach you will help you kind of close out that journey the way you need to grow.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. I want to thank everybody very much for being part of today's webinar. Dan, great information. I took tons of notes, and I'm going to be writing some blog posts on this stuff. For everybody, if you have more questions, Dan will be following up. You can reach out to us, and we'll make sure you get any information you need. And from all of us at Haley Marketing, thank you so much for being part of today's Lunch with Haley webinar.